a high level. So at fire standards, you have the big boss, then you've got two at the next level. One is in charge of the instruction program. He's in group 2 because he's an instructor. The other's a policy person. He's not in group 2, and he's one of these two positions. Because he came to us, in fire standards, came to us several years ago and wanted us to reclassify the job, and we said, you don't fit the definition because it's a policy position, you're not an instructor, and you're not a division head, you're an assistant division head or whatever his title is. And we can't change it. You need legislation, and he's finally got someone to do that for him.
Okay, so I understand that.
Yeah.
And actually agree with it for the most part. Makes perfect sense. But here is my conundrum with these particular 150 and 152. So we heard yesterday that you can serve in the military, if you will, for 20 years and qualify for a pension. And then you can go into private sector, another job, and work for 10 or more years and qualify for another pension. And then when you retire, you basically can collect both those pensions and Social Security as well, as long as you don't work more than a certain number of hours. This is a little bit different. So in this situation, you have somebody who is already a Group 2 member, correct?
Correct.
And
typically.
What's that?
That's what this is designed to address. Yeah.
Okay, exactly. So they're already a Group 2 member. They've already been working for the state and qualified for their pension during that time period. And now they're basically saying, and by the way, I've heard others on this committee talk about the way the retirement system works, where you can work a lot of overtime in your final years and basically boost your final year's average pay and therefore help boost your retirement pension that's coming. And fair enough, that's the way it works. So now they would like to retire and start collecting that boosted pension, and then go back to work for the same agency for basically probably the same salary as a consultant or whatever, or as a positional situation. So now they're collecting their full pension from the state, and they're collecting another paycheck from the state.
Yeah, that's incorrect.
Okay, can you correct
So
tell me why
if they come back, these are all full-time positions, they come back, if they're retired and they come back to this position, their pension stops and they're re-enrolled. This is just a question of whether they're re-enrolled as a Group 1 versus a Group 2.
Thank you for that. That was not made clear yesterday when I asked that.
No, these are all full-time positions, so they're restored to service. The only time you can collect a pension and come back to service are for a select group of exempt positions that apply to officials appointed for the fixed term. So like the commissioner of safety, the head of DMV, there are that have enabling statutes that say you're appointed for a fixed term, nominated by the governor, approved by the executive council. And so those persons are exempt from having to be what we call restored to service. These positions are not exempt. And so someone who's retired takes his position, his pension stops, he'll accrue additional service and re-retire. But if it was a Group 1 position, he'd retire and lose a couple of ancillary benefits that Group 2s get, the most important one being a 50% spousal survivor annuity that you don't have to pay for. Whereas Group 1s, if they want a survivor annuity, they have to pay for it by reducing their own pension.
Thank you very much. I am so glad you came in today, because now I can support this without any qualms.
The only added cost of this is that a Group 1 position, the employer rates are like 14%. The Group 2 for firefighters is 30.3% or something like that. So the employer is going to pay a higher contribution rate, but for 2 positions and 2 salaries. So it's not, I don't think, material to the overall budget.
Chairman Weiler.
One of the things that we talked about, if you go from Group 2 to Group 1, you've qualified for retirement in Group 2. You could start collecting. Now, if you take a Group 1 position, you could supposedly get a second retirement in Group 1.
No.
Why not?
Because if you're the Group 1 position, unless it's one of these officials who are exempt from mandatory membership, whether you come back if you're a retired group 2, whether you come back to a group 2 or a group 1 position, if it's full time, your pension stops. And there's no separate pensions. It's one pension. Now, if you have service in both groups, we'll calculate your years of service in group 2 based on that multiplier, 2.5%, and then we'll calculate a benefit for your years of service on the group 1 side, 1.6% per year. And then we add the two numbers together. But it's not two separate pensions. And that's what we call a split benefit. But it's not two separate pensions, and you're not collecting one while earning another one. You know, whether you had a break in service or whether the move from 2 to 1 was, sequential, one Friday to Monday. It's all one length of service. Perhaps there's a break in there, but it's one period of cumulative service on which your pension is calculated.
Tell me about the exempt positions and how they occur.
Okay, again, it's officials appointed to a fixed term. And that is something that goes back to the state retirement plan prior to NHRS in 1967. Okay, and it's a handful, not a handful, but it's select positions at the higher levels of agencies and divisions, commissioners, assistant commissioners, that I venture to say half of those are in safety because they've got a lot of that position. There's a few of them at DHHS. Some departments, it's just the commissioner. Because you have to be appointed for a fixed term and can only be removed after having a hearing in front of the executive council. Okay? So if the statute says you're appointed for 3 years and you serve at the pleasure of the commissioner, that's not exempt because it's not a fixed term. If the commissioner can fire you at any point, even though it says it's a 3-year term, it's not fixed. And I think the policy, which has been around since before 1967, is that the people that you want to recruit for these high-level positions are often people who have had long careers and have retired or are close to retirement, or maybe they retire in conjunction with getting the new job that's exempt. Those are the people most qualified for these types of positions. That's why you see a lot of them at safety, because if safety wants a commissioner or the head of the state police, who can they hire? Former policemen. They're not going to go out and hire former teachers. So it became a recruitment issue. It's like, well, I got to go out of state if the guy is going to lose his pension because he don't want to take this job. He's got a nice pension. And so that's the policy behind this. So it's a recruitment thing, and it's just long-standing. And the other thing about fixed positions is, and another reason they're exempt, say if they're not Group 2, if the Commissioner Arlene House came from outside service. The idea is, well, you're politically appointed for the most part, and you're not likely to have a long enough career to earn a pension. So the people come in, they're appointed, they work for the term of the governor, and then their term is up and the new governor appoints someone else. And so it's like, why make them pay in? And then when they leave, we give them their contributions back, and we keep the state's contributions. We don't give those back. And it's costing the state money, and you're getting nothing back for it. So that's another policy reason why these positions are exempt, because they're typically politically appointed.
So
Thank you very much.
I guess that like Commissioner Quinn is exempt.
Correct.
And so is he collecting the pension or is he,
Yes.
and he's in Group 2?
He was in Group 2. Now he's not in anything because he's not enrolled because he's exempt.
Oh, he's not enrolled. I remember another former deputy commissioner who was offered the opportunity, but it was only like a 4-year term. He said, no, that's not enough. And then he got 2 or 3 more 4-year terms, and I spoke to him after he'd been in the job for 12 years. He said, I wished I'd enrolled, but I didn't think it was worth it.
That would be someone who came from outside. We have that, for instance, all unclassified positions in the state are optional. So when you take an unclassified job, you can choose to join. If if you decide not to, you can do that later. So that person who thought, I'm only going to have this job for a few years, and they realize, hey, this is a career. I want to sign up now. Once you sign up, you're in. You can't get out. You can't toggle back and forth. And the only exception to that is if you are a retiree collecting a pension, you can't, membership is not optional for unclassified unless it's one of these fixed term exempt positions. So that was a change that was put in 2011 to say, all right, unclassifieds have always been exempt, whereas classifieds have always been mandatory. But we had people who were retiring, collecting a pension, and taking unclassified middle-level positions. And for policy reasons, they said, no, if you're collecting a pension, it's not optional. You have to join, your pension stops. Again, unless you're in one of those high-level exempt positions.
Could we make these two positions exempt? Give them a 4-year term and exempt them from,
That's a policy choice, but it would require legislation that specifically said, and it would have to be someone nominated by the governor, appointed by the executive council, instead of the head of the Department of Fire Standards picking his own guy. He's got to go through that process. Now, if there are countervailing reasons to make it exempt, that's a choice for the legislature to make.
Then
It's
how-
possible.
would he be collecting, if you made the position exempt, could he start collecting his retirement pay in Group 2?
My apologies.
Could he start collecting Group 2 retirement, get an exempt position, and either he would not, and perhaps not collect or not contribute to the retirement system?
Correct. Just like any exempt position that currently exists. This would just be adding 2 more positions to it. They're not the type of positions that are typically exempt. But again, policy choice, but possible.
It would save us the 30% contribution to the wages.
Now, if that's important, you can submit a bill.
I mean, it's a big piece. So even if they kept the same pay or even a little more, if they went into this position, but we made an exempt position a 4-year term, it might attract somebody. They could collect their retirement, right?
Correct.
But they would still get about the same pay or more. And, there shouldn't be any complaint.
Correct. I think the policy motivation is the recruitment side of it, not to avoid contributions.
Well, it's worked. I remember my police chief was collecting retirement, working part-time as a police chief.
Well, that's because part-time positions don't enroll in our system. So anyone can retire, collect a pension, and go back to work at any state or municipal job part-time, long as they don't exceed the annual limits on work hours, which is 1,352 per year.
The annual limits rather than the weekly limits.
In 2016, when the bill first passed to limit retiree part-time work hours, it was a 32-hour-a-week limit. That became administratively difficult. And so in 2019, it was switched to an annual, which made it less onerous on the employers to keep track week by week. And it also allowed employees to not have to be limited to 32 hours every week so that they could work seasonally. So a guy could snowplow and work 50, 60 hours a week when it's snowing and go to Florida in the summer, long as his annual is under the limit. And so that was changed in 2019.
Yes, I think it was a good decision.
I think so too. It made our job easier,
Representative Murray?
just administering it, I mean.
Thank you. You used a phrase, I wonder if you could explain. So I'm understanding that a person does their job, they retire, they want to continue into a new position here. They don't lose their retirement, they're just not collecting it while they're in this new position.
Correct.
And you used the phrase accrue additional services. What is,
Oh, service time.
so,
So you retire, you're a police officer, you're age 45, you retire 20 years.
so I've retired with, X amount, and I'm going to continue in this other position for another amount of time, so that's
Right.
my X amount plus the
Additional
amount.
years.
So it's added on to the original.
Oh, yeah. If you ever break in,
Okay.
whether you ever break in service or not, we count all your years of service. So it's not forfeited. We just add the service and recalculate your benefit based on how much you were making when you retired the second time.
Representative Popovich.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank you for making the time to come over. It was a humongous amount of help, not just in addressing that specific question that we had because of the confusing testimony we got yesterday, but just in terms of overall a better understanding of how the retirement system works, which frankly I think benefits us all. So I really appreciate your expertise, and you must have done this once or twice before, and it shows. Really appreciate
Not my
it.
first horse ride.
Thank you.
Representative Weiler.
Could I indulge on a separate matter, take a minute or two? The committee is the county delegation assistant that we have working in Rockingham County. Has just enough hours. She's more or less not full-time, but has enough hours to be in the retirement system. She's coming up on 30 years and perhaps retirement age. And I said, well, we'd like to keep you working so many hours as you train a replacement, because it is a little complicated. And she said, well, I would lose 10% if I did that. Now I'm wondering, why would she lose?
No.
If she kept working the same hours, but had already qualified.
All right, I know what you're saying. First, is it for Group 1 employees, such as this position at the county, you're required to be enrolled if you work 35 hours a week, even if the employer considers 40 to be full-time. It's 35, okay? I get this question a lot. You don't lose your pension, but if you're retiring and your employer wants you to help with the transition with your replacement, they want you to do that starting the next day when the replacement shows up.
Right.
Our working after retirement rules not only have an annual limit, they also have a prohibition against working for 28 days after you retire. So a teacher who retires can't do summer school that year. Teachers who retire from a high school but have traditionally taught a summer course at one of the community colleges can't do it that summer. Person retiring, the employer says, I really need you to stay on part-time and train your replacement. They can't start doing that for 28 days. And that was put into the law. Legislature's policy decision that there should be some gap in service. Why is it 28 days? Well, the original bill was 90 days. However, Group 2 said that doesn't work for us because if we're not working for 30 days, we lose our certification. So they made it 28 days. The other part of that is for people who take early retirement prior to their normal retirement age, which is 60 or 65 for a Group 1 position, you can't, under IRS rules, this is federal tax law, you can't have a prearrangement to return to part-time service if it's an early retirement. A gap in service creates some presumption that there was not a prearrangement. And so it helps from our enforcement point of view. We've only had one prearrangement case, and it was easy because the person signed a contract to come back part-time before they retired. So we had conclusive proof there was a prearrangement. Just an understanding is a lot harder to prove. And but in the absence of a gap in service, if someone leaves on Friday full-time and shows up on Monday part-time, there's a reasonable presumption that they talked about it beforehand and there was a prearrangement.
Well,
So I am in favor of the gap in service because I don't have to start reading people's mind about whether there was or wasn't a prearrangement.
well, suppose she is offered, has a 28 days she's off. And now she's 66 years old. And I want to bring her back with this maybe 32 or 35 hours.
Be less than 35, and if she works all year, it's 1,352, and if you work 52 weeks, that works out to 26 hours a week, and that would include, vacation time and sick time that you get paid for. We're going to count those as work hours because you're getting paid for them.
Would there
Representative
be,
Weiler, could you take this off?
All right.
I'd really like to get a lot
Sure.
of things done today. Thank you both very much for coming. I really appreciate
Thank
your
you
help.
for having
Thank you. It
us.
really helped clarify the issue.
No, I don't need that, but can we vote on these three things right now since they're fresh in our mind? Are you good with that? Are you good with that too? Yeah. Okay. You could. Trying to maintain control.
Always in the dark. We were gonna talk about going out to lunch somewhere. We needed at noon, and I texted Mary Jane, but do we have to? We did. Didn't we meet yesterday? Or yesterday was Monday?
Yes. You're welcome. So maybe I don't even need Mickey here for this. Do I need you here for this? I do.
Maybe we should see if anyone has.
Who's running this show anyway?
Do not ask a question you don't know the answer to. Come on.
Should we make sure everybody's comfortable with that information?
I would think that you could call Commissioner Quinn and suggest this person be a 4-year term.
And no, we're not going to do that, Representative Weiler, because you're basically talking about him double dipping. That was the concern that I had, collecting a pension and collecting a salary. So let's just do this. It's clean and simple. It's what they want, and I'm on board with it now. So unless somebody opposes what we're doing right now, I'll let Mickey direct me as to how I can get through this without spending too much more time.
Okay, so working from the tracking sheets, if you want to focus on the sections you just discussed, 150, 152, and then also Amendment 1112H, which is on page 17 of your amendment packet. And you can take them individually. I think what you're looking to do is accept, and then adopt the amendment. And you can do a show of hands in order of 1, 2, 3. of
Okay.
those.
And the amendment you referred to is related to 151?
It's just related to the discussion of the definition of worker membership for the retirement system in Group 2. So this is the amendment that added the Division of Fire Safety to RSA 100A3C.
Okay.
And you see
So
that.
we'll come to that one last. Yep. Let's do section 150 first. Do I have a motion?
No.
150.
I'll second.
So the motion is to accept section 150 of HB 2, to recommend acceptance of HB 2, section 150? 63.
It's on just page, page. There's no amendment. This is just accepting it how it is in House Bill 2.
When you're ready, Madam Clerk. No, we show our hands, right? Yeah. So all in favor? It's unanimous. Accept, yes. All right, now we will
Same exact thing for
move to number, section 150 of HB 2 on page 64. And I'll look, no, I'm going to do 152 next. That's the other one that's related to 150.
This is 152 we're discussing.
Correct. Look for a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt it.
I'll second.
You have the hyphenated names making the motion and seconding. Spending more clerk time.
Are you all set? All right, so show of hands, all in favor of accepting section 152 of HB 2? That's everybody?
Yep.
Okay, nothing? Okay. Now, the third one is in that your packet, that not the one you just handed out.
It's in the one I just handed out on page 17.
I get that.
Okay.
But is it also in the big one?
No, this adds 5.
This is reconsideration of the previous vote.
Nope. So this is a brand new amendment to House Bill 2. If you go to page 17 of your amendment packet, this was part of what the Department of Safety had asked for yesterday. It's not in House Bill 2. It was additional language added relative to Group 2 discussions.
What page? from the packet?
Page 17. Page 17, 1-7.
No, it's just something else. Okay, never mind. I don't need to see it.
Yep,
I
the
know what
only
it does.
change
I'm
is just
trying to
adding
find it so I
or
can
the
mark it up.
Division of Fire Safety on lines 13 and 14.
All right, so show of hands, all in favor? Unanimous. Oh, I think we had a motion, didn't we? We did. Make a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt Amendment 1112H to HB2.
And second, Representative Weiler. And now we'll exercise our arms one more time. Show of hands. Okay. Thank you. So where do you want to go next?
Did we already do the red letters? We did the red page yesterday?
So
It was the page before that in the packet that they gave,
there
which
is an
had red.
amendment drafted in here. We can get to that today.
Oh.
I have that. So going back to the cover of the tracking sheets, I can just roll right through here. There are some new amendments today, and you can take those up if you just want to check some more boxes. The first thing, page 25 of House Bill 2, sections 21 and 22 is relative to the education freedom account. Expansion the governor proposed. You just had some thorough debate about this on House Bill 115 this morning. Representative Irf has an amendment 1075H, which is the language of House Bill 115 as amended by the House. And what this amendment would do is overwrite the governor's proposal with the House passed EFA expansion policy. Yeah, it's on
Did you say it's on your tracking sheet? Where?
sorry, page 5. The amendment is on page
20
5, and you'll see it on the tracking sheet with it's House Bill 2, page number 25,
Yep.
sections 21, 22. Amendment number 1075H.
Representative Popovich.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move to adopt Amendment 1075H to HB2.
And second. Representative Bean. And do you want to do show of hands or do you want to do a roll call?
Show of hands is the
okay.
practice. If I think you could do that if everyone's okay with it.
That's fine. We can do whatever you'd like. So when you're ready, Madam Clerk.
Aye.
Yes.
No.
No.
Luno. It's French. It's French. Well, a lot of people in New Hampshire are French. So, yeah, but I'm a no. Thank you.
How's that? No. And Chair Earp?
Yes.
All right, that's fine. I'm terrible with names, I do apologize. Although my husband is. But and everyone calls me Roy, but it's not a Leroy.
Worsen your position.
I think the next amendment that the committee can consider is, it's on page 8 of the amendment packet. It's amendment number 1113H, which would be a reconsideration of a previous amended section. This is section 51 of House Bill 2. So this was the cleanup language that the department included in House Bill 2 that eliminated some reference of some functionality that DHHS does. So there was overlap, but there was actually a second component to that, which was not included in House Bill 2. What this amendment on page 8 does is incorporates both, as we discussed yesterday. So what you could do procedurally is reconsider Amendment 0813H, which was previously adopted by this committee, and replace it with 1113H, which does what the previous amendment did, plus what the new section that they had asked for.
Is that two motions or one?
You can do 2 just so it's clean.
Okay. Yeah, Representative Popovich, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As having voted on the prevailing side, I would like to vote to reconsider the previous vote on adopting Amendment 0813H.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Representative Hagen Phillips. Show of hands. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Representative Popovich?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make the motion to adopt Amendment 1113H to HB2.
I should also second that since it's a similar theme.
Representative Hackett Phillips, seconds. Thank you. Let me know when you're ready. All in favor, raise your hands. Unanimous. Any opposed? Beautiful. Mr. Lindergren?
I think I have one more thing we can do if we just go up a little bit on the tracking sheet. So page 63, sections 145 and 146 relative to the general fund lapse of fire standards into the fire fund. So if you recall, the governor's budget includes $4 million in fiscal 26 to prop up the fire fund at Department of Safety. This section of House Bill 2 says that any amount of that $4 million that they don't spend, rather than it lapsing back to the general fund, it would just lapse to the fire fund. So they would get the whole benefit of that $4 million in the fire fund. It's 63 and then 145, 146.
Where does that lapse from?
So it's a general fund appropriation in the budget, and this law would say that any amount of that appropriation that's not spent, rather than it lapsing back to the general fund, it would lapse to the fire fund.
It would already be in there.
It's already in House Bill 1 entirely, so their budget is built on this section staying intact.
Representative Popovich?
Mr. Chair, I would like to move to adopt the language on page 63, section 145, 146 regarding the general fund lapse to fire standards and so on.
Second.
Second.
Representative Weiler, Chairman Weiler. Let me know when you're ready, Madam Clerk. All set? Show of hands in favor. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Yes, sir.
Is the committee ready to decide on section 147? So this is relative, I'm sorry, 148. This is relative to the federal agents or their authorized agents that was included as far as motor vehicle records checks.
So I am. How do you all feel about this?
Rejection, there might be some privacy issues.
Yes.
But we don't have to consider it now. If
Privacy.
Anybody does.
I'm okay with that if you will. Go for it.
so, did you make a motion, Representative Popovich?
Well, I'd be happy to make a motion to adopt the language on page 63, section 148 of HB2 regarding safety driver history records related prohibition.
Do you have a second? Is that the right one, Mickey?
Isn't
That
it
is section 148. That's
148?
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
one.
Have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Representative DeRoy? Okay. Let me know when you're ready. All right. All in favor, show your hands. Any opposed? It's unanimous.
I'm sensing folks maybe want a little bit more time on section 149 relative to the E911 fund.
Do we have
we
it
had
in there
a
yet?
lot of discussion about that yesterday, but I'll let.
Yeah, so I stayed. I was up pretty late last night waiting for some sort of response. I got nothing from the Department of Safety. So my inclination is to remove it from HB2 and to have HB1 amended so that it moves that line item back into their operational budget, which is usually a mix, from my understanding, with talking with Mickey, is usually a mix of general funds and highway funds to support that line item. So I think obviously we'll have to draw some amendment up to that effect, given that the accounting unit that was created shows up right now in HB1, right? Isn't that correct, Mickey? Or am I talking
Yeah,
out of turn?
so the accounting unit, the communications section, it's called accounting unit in the Bureau of Emergency Communications. So you can see that entire accounting unit is about $2+ million a year that is supported with the E911 fund. If you were not to adopt this section, you would essentially put that out of compliance. So you would have to find another source of funding. I will just reiterate what the department said yesterday. This has been a long-standing budget practice going back probably over 10 years that these costs have been funded with the E911 fund. This statute is just putting into compliance with the law with what we've been doing in the budget for a long time. So if we don't want the 911 fund to support those functions, like Representative Hacken Phillips said, you'd want to find an alternate use of funds if you wanted to support that spending, and a mix of highway and general is the most logical.
Now, I thought we talked about allocating it between the 911 fund, since they do make use of it, and
Yep,
also
and the department is working on that. I don't want to make it sound like they haven't provided. I know they are working on that and trying to. I think a lot of it was, I think my understanding was that is how they broke it out in the budget to already do that allocation of what was. So if there is a portion of accounting unit 4001, the one we're talking about, that is attributable to 911, I'll see if I can get that breakdown. So it might be less of an amount that you need to find an alternate source for.
Representative Popovich.
It seems that maybe we could wait until Friday just to get a bit more time to get the data. I don't want to pull the trigger now and then have to reconsider things, and but I wouldn't really want to wait past Friday, because then we're going to really be in crunch time, and this is a smaller item that I'd like to deal with. So if that would work.
I'm happy to wait till Friday. I think that would give the department more time to come back to us, since they didn't last night. I mean, I'm sure they're working on it. I'm sure they just don't have the actual final breakdown. So I'm happy to wait. That's fine.
Mr. Landrigan.
The other two House Bill 2 sections that I think you could consider if you wanted to today are, there's a couple of new amendments. One is the language of House Bill 675, which we talked about yesterday and retained. I think there was also one of the bills that Representative Erf mentioned that we may have a reconsideration work session at another time. You can see that down in the bottom section of the first page of the tracking pack, Amendment 1082, as well as the language from House Bill 649, which is the passenger vehicle inspection repeal bill that passed. That's Amendment 1092. So those are drafted and in this packet. If that's something the committee is in a place to consider, you could do that now. I also have the Department of Education here to answer some questions on what is in House Bill 2, if you have any, as well as a couple other requests that they've had. We can
So
go
in
in either
675,
direction.
you haven't the amendment to put it into HB2. Is that what you're?
For 675,
Is that what you're saying?
that's what amendment number 1082 is the exact language from House Bill 675 as amended by the House
To put it in HB2.
to put it into HB2.
Okay. Are you all comfortable voting on that or not? Oh, that's the local caps, local budget cap.
I had fun. Yeah. 13, page 13 is for 1092. And I would guess 1082 is right before it. Yes, page 213.
The other one is,
Let's just do one at a time, or I'm going to lose my place.
I don't think the Democrats' votes are going to change. So if we
I'm
had
not looking
adequate
for that.
discussion
I'm just-
yesterday, so if we want to go through like the procedural vote, I think that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. So, you got a motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move to adopt the amendment 1082H to HB2.
Nikki, is this in our packet as well?
Page 12.
Oh, sorry, page 12, yes.
Thank you.
Is there a second? Thank you. All right, is the show of hands okay, or do you want to do a roll call?
Could we please do a roll call?
Of course we
Thank you.
can. Yes, no problem. Whenever you're ready, Madam Clerk.
Aye.
Have this on. Representative Bean,
Yes.
Representative DeRoy, yes. Chair Weiler. Yes. Representative Murray,
No,
Representative Hacken Phillips.
No.
Okay, and, oh, gotta have it. Mr. Representative Luno.
No.
No, sorry, Luno, trying. Okay. And
What's his name?
Representative, what's his name? Right there, sitting there, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. 5-3, motion moves. I'll get it.
Representative Popovich?
I'm ready.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to adopt Amendment 1092H to HB2. It's on page 13 of our handout.
I don't have that. What is it?
Page
What bill is it?
13.
It is Bill 649, Passenger Vehicle Inspection Repeal.
This is on the what? No.
That'd be well. Yeah, yes, take your time.
Okay, this is 092.
That's already done. Oh, okay, all right.
The real life bill number?
The bill number is HB 649, again related to Passenger Vehicle Inspection Repeal. The amendment is 1092H.
The wrong one.
We've just done.
Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go.
So we just done.
Came out
Yep.
18,
Yep, yep, yep.
then did the vote 5% on the floor. Passed 212, 133, referred to it. Waived me, waived it off, no. Two twelve to 133.
and this is just for the major.
Transportation was 18.
We want the roll call or a show of hands of this one?
I'm guessing, you're the second on that? Chairman Weiler? And I'm assuming you'd like a roll call? Is that,
Sure, we'll take 2 minutes. Just a caucus.
oh, of course, sure. Yeah, yeah, go ahead. Caucus, that's fine. Okay. Show of hands or
No. Oh, okay. I'm fine. No, that's fine.
whatever you guys want.
Nope.
So show of hands, all in favor? Opposed? 5-3. And what were we just voting?
That was the amendment 1092H.
Show me here. What I crossed out. Perfect.
1092H, yeah, that's all we need to write down, 1092H, then that explains what it is. Yeah.
Okay. Any,
So does the committee, do you have your, it was something I handed out Friday that is, I don't even know if I have mine. It looks like this. It was House Finance Division 2 Agency House Bill 2 draft language document. If you don't have it and you have a tablet, it is on the Division 2 website. It's posted. So the department is here because there was some questions about some of their sections that they had included in there, as well as a couple that are in House Bill 2 already. So Caitlin Davis is here to answer questions about those. I will move aside for her.
There's gotta be one down there.
Go, go, go. We cannot do anything without you anyway, don't worry.
Do you have yours or no?
I may have mine, but I have this big stack somewhere in here, I'm sure. Or not. Does my stack go to Friday?
don't want to split the ones with money. I do not want to split the ones with money.
Yeah, it does.
So I don't know if they want to do that now.
So what do you want to do?
You can say it.
Page 7. Page
Oh,
7.
there it is.
Were you good?
I went,
Today.
okay, so we're on page 7.
It looks, the actual, the beginning looks like that. So I'm not sure that we want to vote. I believe 2 of these require money, if I'm not mistaken.
I think if you want to take them one at a time, we can.
No, I understand that, but
Yep.
but is
So-
that an accurate statement?
I would say none of these you're going to vote on now. I'd say
Oh, okay.
possibly. So if you have your tracking sheet again, which I don't even know where I put mine.
You get back to that, huh? Killing me.
So
I can just switch papers. You
I
are
think
the one.
section 54, or excuse me, page 54, page 55, section 121 and 122, you could probably vote on today and accept. Ms. Davis can explain chartered public school funding changes. It's somewhat technical in nature. There's not a whole lot happening with that one. And then as far as everything in that draft language packet, none of those are drafted amendments at this point. If once you hear from the department, if you want me to draft it, I can do it at that point, and then you will include it on a future day to vote on, if that makes sense. She's here to just answer questions if you have any.
Did you find it?
No, I had it.
Spending board?
Because then he said, go look at your tracking sheet. So just to reiterate, there's some that we can vote on.
He says 121, 120.
Don't tell me the pages. I had the document, but I don't have the document
Do you
because
have the
I have that.
Yep, so on the tracking sheet, page 55, sections 121 and 122 in House Bill 2 relative to charter public school funding. Those sections, I think, can be moved along at this point. I think we've heard about those, and you can hear more if you need today, and that would be the one section in House Bill 2 that I think you're ready with today. After that, the department has a bunch of new things they want you to consider. That's in that other document, and she's here to answer questions about
Vicky.
those.
The tracking sheet from today doesn't have 55 pages.
No.
So it's
Page 1.
It's House Bill,
What page?
House Bill 2, page 55. It's,
I don't need to see the thing right now. Okay. I want to know where the vote is on the tracking sheet.
Page 1, right here.
Thank you.
This
So
is
which
what
one?
happens when we're up all night.
121, 120, 55, 121, 120. That's the.
And that we can vote on.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ms. Davis, Mrs. Davis.
So the way that the VLAX funding works is so it's different than other charter schools. VLAX we pay based on the percent completion of a course. We've always historically done it that way, and this change in the law just helps better define exactly what we're doing for the VLAX change. So we don't anticipate there being any costs associated with this. We don't anticipate there being any costs or any changes associated with our current practices. It's just codifying that because time and time again, the department is asked kind of, what gives us the authority to make the payments in the fashion that we do, because the other charter schools we pay based on a count in time, which doesn't necessarily make sense for VLAX. So that's what that is allowing us to do. So.
Any questions from the committee? No? So are you all ready to vote on this? Is this one correct?
Yes.
It increased substantially during the pandemic. Then there was a slight decline after the pandemic, but it stayed about the same level the last 3 to 4 years. There are about 12,000 students statewide that are taking courses at VLAX. That is reduced down. That's not an ADM though. It's not. They're not taking full-time classes of it, but 12,000 that are accessing it.
Any other discussion?
I'm comfortable with this. I'm just looking across the room. If everyone else looks comfortable, is it appropriate to make a motion to accept this?
Sure.
Then I will. I will make a motion to accept section, I guess it was 121?
121, 122?
And 122 for the charter public schools funding items.
Second.
Second, Mr. Representative Popovich. And let me know when you're ready, Madam Clerk. So show of hands in favor. Okay, any opposed? Unanimously passes. Section 121, 122 in HB2. Page 55. Okay, where do you want to go next?
so now back to that draft language packet from last Friday, if you go to page 8 of that starts the Department of Education's submitted language that they wanted you to consider. So, and Caitlin can walk us through that.
And where is it on the tracking sheet?
It's not.
It's not on the track sheet.
This was the department's, some of it is the department's prioritized needs.
You don't
that
have
they
to remember the
presented
file
to
name, do
us.
you?
It was this one.
No,
from
I need the
March
actual
10th.
file name.
Yeah, division budget hearing, maybe?
Want me to send you the link real quick?
Yeah.
I can send you the link. And it can show up in your email.
It's not, this is not in the packet. This is that other document I just gave you a copy of. Yep.
Does it have a name? Because I've got a whole bunch of things.
I just check your email. Maybe it should be at the top of your email.
All right.
Takes a long time to get the 10 feet from me to you.
I know. The server.
Go ahead.
So I can just take you through the requests from the department. So they start on the page that's labeled page 8. It's PDF page 9. And the department had 2 potential requests relative to the assessment. So we had a prioritized need, and if you for $1.5 million, and then if you choose to accept that prioritized need, then we would need this language. And then if you choose not to accept the prioritized need, we're still looking for a little technical cleanup language relative to the assessment grant. So the 2 different options are this. So right now, the state requires an assessment in grades 3 through 8 and 11, once in high school. And the department had proposed having an additional assessment in high school required by the state, and therefore the state would pay for it. The department envisions that to look like probably the PSAT, which we know that a lot of New Hampshire high schools are already using that and have data. And there has been a lot of requests for the department to have that PSAT data in addition to the SAT data to measure growth and to look at overall performance, as well as the state to provide funding for local schools that choose to use the PSAT. The only way the department could do that is if the department was then implementing another assessment in addition to the 11th grade assessment. And so that's why we requested the $1.5 million, which would pay for the state assessment statewide for any high schooler that took the SAT, and then the state of New Hampshire would then have the performance results of the PSAT to be able to look at that information. We would be able to publish achievement results relative to the PSAT. We would be able to measure growth in high school, because if you remember, growth is a measurement of year to year, and we don't have any growth information at the high school. So that's what the department's request is that $1.5 million to pay for the SAT, and then require schools to participate in the PSAT. The department had kind of done it in a rolling basis. So the first year of the budget, or the second year of the budget, actually, we proposed making the assessment available to allow for time to roll it out. And then for fiscal year 28, so the next biennium budget, we proposed requiring the department to implement the PSAT statewide. So just a reminder, so as I said before, we do assessments in grades 3 through 8 and 11 currently in English language arts, math, and science. And so this would be 3 through 8, 10 and 11. And so it would give us an additional year of assessment. Public schools, public district schools, and public charter schools are required to participate in the assessment per state and federal law right now. And we publish the results of that assessment on our website and on our iPlatform if anybody's interested in seeing that information.
I have a question for Ms. Landrigan. So this isn't line 10 on page 2 of your tracking sheet from today?
Yes, so for this assessment, there's 2 amendments here she's considering, or asking you to consider. The first is if you do fund line 10, the $1.5 million a year to do the 10th grade assessment. If you don't fund it and support that, there's another amendment here just doing some technical changes that she spoke to. So there's an amendment either way that they're asking for, whether you fund it and expand it to 10th grade or not. And those are the first 2 in their section here.
So I guess I'll ask where the committee stands on the funding part.
SAT?
So all it does is it eliminates the use of that vendor specifically being called out in law. The Department of Education doesn't think it's best practice to call specific vendors out in law. And it's permitting it, but not requiring it currently. So it says the department may. So it's not a law that really accomplishes anything. Right now, the department is using SAT for the 11th grade assessment. We've been using it, I believe, since 2015, at least 8 years, but likely 10 years, for the 11th grade assessment, which accomplishes two things. One, it obviously we have a state and federal requirement to have an assessment, but it also allows all 11th graders in the state of New Hampshire to access the SAT free of cost to them, which we think is a phenomenal benefit. And that's one of the reasons when we moved to SAT to begin with, we thought that would be very helpful for New Hampshire students. We right now have a 5-year contract with SAT, which started this year. So that would go for at least 4 more academic years after this existing year. But we just didn't think it is best practice to have a specific vendor named in law, especially when it doesn't require it. Now, the committee could do something else, which said the Department of Education is required to use the SAT, and then that law would make sense. But where it's just a may, we didn't think it was best practice.
Representative Luna.
Thanks very much, and thanks, Ms. Davis, for bringing this forward and for that explanation. I agree with you that there's tremendous benefit for the state using the SAT by the College Board, right?
Correct.
For the 11th grade assessment, and it would make a lot of sense if we're going to do a 10th grade assessment that the companion test, the PSAT, be used for that. However, while in general I think I agree with you that that calling out specific vendors in law, may not be always best practice. In this case, I think it's really important because it applies to all of our kids in public schools as well as the kids in private and homeschool that want to avail themselves of the test. And it's a very strong, is the term nationally norm referenced test that thousands and thousands and millions of kids across the country are taking. So it really allows us to compare New Hampshire's performance in a very strong way with the performance, among other states and actually internationally too. So I would support maybe changing in paragraph, where are we? Paragraph 5, that we change the may to a shall and reference the PSAT and the SAT for use in 10th grade and 11th grade statewide assessments.
Representative Popovich.
Thank you. If I may ask a question, are the two amendments provided a either or are they cumulative?
No, they're either or.
So we got to pick one of them, but it wouldn't make sense to adopt the lesser one without funding and then adopt the other one, because then we'd have to.
Exactly. What we don't want is you to
Okay.
say we require the 10th grade assessment, but then not provide us any funding
Oh,
to
of
do that,
course.
because the state of New Hampshire pays for all of the assessments for schools that are for the state assessment required of schools right now. And there are a fair number of schools right now that are participating in the PSAT at their own local expense. So this would have the
Understood,
state
but
accumulate
that's,
response.
I think that may be a slightly different question than the one I asked. I was asking if the way the amendments are written, are they cumulative or are they either or? They're either or?
Either or.
So we got to adopt only one of them, but,
Correct.
okay.
For this first one,
Right,
the rest
and-
of them are not.
Am I
Yeah.
right in understanding that we could also do neither? Or no?
Yes, that's
I mean, it would be
the other.
it would be not a great place for the state to be in, but it's possible.
So realistically, the rest of it's just cleanup language. It doesn't change our program at all. For example, the law right now refers to private schools may contact the Department of Education for participation. Well, we don't have private schools, we have non-public schools. So every time the department is seeing that language, we try to fix it. But if you chose to do nothing with it, it also doesn't matter.
I'll tell you where I'm coming from. I'm not comfortable with the funding, but I'm willing to, if others are, we could wait and vote on this, next week or on Friday. But I'll look to the committee for direction. Representative Murray.
Thank you. A number of universities are not using SATs anymore. What are the other options? I support using the SAT, but I'm curious, what would your other options be? And I see you also have ACT as one that's listed
So
that you would
ACT
not.
is one of them too.
But that's also-
our just another traditional test. So in the past, we had our statewide assessment, which was NECAP, and NECAP had an 11th grade assessment. So we might work with just another assessment vendor to develop a statewide assessment. Cambium is our assessment vendor for grade 3 through 8 right now. So we call it New Hampshire SAS. So if we weren't to use SAT or PSAT or ACT, one of those, we might then just have Cambium develop an 11th grade assessment for the state of New Hampshire.
How useful is NECAP to kids who are going to college out of state?
I don't have that information, but it's hard to compare statewide information if you're not using the same assessment. So,
Representative Popovich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was really looking at this discussion as an informational one, since there is, money in this. I would wait with the vote on this until we, can make the funding decisions. And, for now, I was looking to just understand what the content of it is. And personally, I would suggest that while the department can operate without either of the two amendments, the fact that they brought them up, looking at the language, it seems that the items they're trying to clarify, even in the one without funding, are relevant enough that, maybe we should eliminate some of that confusion. And there is no harm if somebody, later decides to have a bill to put through a policy committee to address the same language, if anything that we do may not be exactly ideal. So, I would suggest that maybe we should adopt one of them, but there is no need to make that decision right now. Just sharing my thoughts.
Mr. Landrigan.
I just want to remind everyone of the process where we're at. None of these are drafted, and they're not going to get drafted unless one of the members of this committee says, I want to support this and bring it to the committee. And if you do that, I'll add it to the tracking sheet and it can be considered at a later time. I kind of would hope you decide today if you're going to do that or not. Otherwise, these will just be off the tracking sheet. This is just kind of a last, because this committee seemed to have questions about some of the outstanding items here. So that's the purpose of today. If we roll through these and then you get the information you need, and you'll know, yes, I do want to have an amendment drafted and support that at a later work session or not. That's what we're going for today.
Okay. Representative Murray.
Thank you. I just want to add, I'm sort of, given how much we have to do, it's sort of my inclination to let this slide. And I just want to point out that if we're being overly generous with the vouchers, then this is another thing we would have been able to consider if we weren't already in such a deficit in terms of the money. And so here again, this is a decision that this committee has made with regards to how we use the money. And I still have to register an objection that where everything else is being cut or held level, that we are still expanding the voucher system.
Representative Popovich.
Thank you. Mr. Landrigan, I'm inclined to at least ask for the, amendment that does not require funds to be drafted. How much additional work would be to draft both of them so we have both of them available if we decide that we can find the money somewhere?
We can do that. What I'm trying to avoid is drafting.
A surprise at the last moment, right? No, I understand. So
if you want me to do that, I can.
I would rather have all the tools in the toolbox if we could, so I would appreciate if both of them would be drafted then. Thank you.
Representative Luna.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. So in the current current statute, we say the department may use College Board SAT or ACT.
correct. That's the current law.
So the SAT clearly has a companion for 10th graders, the PSAT.
Correct.
Does the ACT have something similar?
I believe it does. I don't know.
I took it.
Okay. I don't know if I don't know if they call it the PAC. I don't know what they call
Okay.
it. So, but they do have some
The
problem.
PAC.
Yeah.
So would it be possible maybe to if you wanted to, if this committee were considering amendment, that you consider a SAT/PSAT tracked or an ACT/PSAT for the 11th and 10th grade, just so that they're you can track growth, which I think
Right.
is your interest. You probably would want to avoid an SAT/PACT.
That is correct. Right. Or we wouldn't want New Hampshire SAS to have a
Right,
grade
right,
assessment.
right.
Yes, we want a comparable test so we can measure.
maybe some language that gives the department, that sort of option.
Representative Popovich?
I think that's something that the department would do regardless, but if you'd like to have that language, how would you write it so we don't lock the department into a specific vendor, which I think we want to avoid because we want to give them the flexibility as vendor products evolve to continue choosing the best product for us. So
If I can respond to that, because you'd be
Yeah.
offering two vendor options there.
but what if there is a third or a fourth that develops in the 4 years until, this is where I'm coming
Sure,
from.
sure. And then I think that's why the legislature meets every year, and it could consider a policy update on it. But I think these are two very strong vendors that are nationally norm referenced, that have a large number of students, millions of students throughout the country, throughout the state and country. Well, not millions in New Hampshire, but millions throughout the country that do take this. So it not only provides students with a zero cost option to take the SAT or the ACT in their junior year that they can use should they want to apply for post-secondary colleges, but it also allows the department and the schools to not only look at how their students are doing within New Hampshire, but also across the country. So it provides, I think, two very, very strong and worthwhile things. I agree that if the money's not there, that really only applies to the 10th grade
Correct.
part. And so possibly the two amendments that my colleague from Hanover was suggesting would be, one that had an 11th grade option of SAT or ACT, and one that would have the corresponding option for 10th grade.
If I may?
Yeah.
If we could find language that instead of naming specific products, just makes it clear. I think what your goal is, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so please correct me, but what I understand you as looking for is this compatibility between the test taking in the 10th grade and the 12th grade, so they are comparable and, and they can, we have longitudinal data for the same student that's easy to compare. Do I understand your intent correctly there?
So that it's compatible.
Right.
I agree with that part. That it provides the ability for the state to assess districts' student outcome performance, both within the state and how the state fares against, in view of other states. So how our performance looks on a national basis, but also so that it provides a high value to our students. And there are other nationally norm reference tests that do not provide a high value to our students. For instance, most colleges would not be looking at some very small tests as a guide for admissions, or to be able to assess how a student is performing against the pool of applicants that they're looking at. So I really think in this case we likely do want to provide guidance to the department in terms of one vendor or the other vendor. And that should more vendors down the road, a year from now, 10 years from now, adopt or offer tests that students can take that are widely accepted, throughout the country in post-secondary settings, that we could amend the language to be able to do that. But that's why we meet every year.
Thank you. I, speaking for myself and on, first thought, because we didn't really have time to sleep on this, I would probably be willing to support the language that's vendor, that does not specify a vendor, but does describe what you are looking for in terms of the guidance for the department. I'm just concerned about, us substituting our immediate judgment on the specific vendors to the one of the department. But I hear exactly what you're suggesting in terms of the criteria that you'd use to assess that. And I would personally be comfortable with language that, is included in the amendment to say those are the characteristics of the test that we'd like to the department to suggest. But I'm not so trusting the ability of the legislature to make the necessary statutory changes as things develop. I know we're meeting every year, but we also have 2,000 bills every year, and I don't want, a statutory language like this to creep in near the deadline and tie the hands of the department. So I would support descriptive language, but not specific in terms of the actual vendors in the second amendment that allocates the funds, if that helps.
I think that would help. I think it would need to, from my perspective, it would need to follow very closely how I characterized those tests and the value that it has for our group of broadest group of students in the state who are seeking post-secondary opportunities.
How about this? The two of you get together and come up with the language you like today, and we'll go from there. And then Mickey can draft that.
I can stick around. If you guys don't want to take lunch.
I was going to say, I had no plans for lunch whatsoever. Why not have it a work lunch?
I have to be gone by 3 today. I have a security meeting that I have to be at, so.
Okay. So do you want to keep moving now, or do you want to take a break?
I mean,
Okay.
I have at least several hours after lunch too. So if we want to draft that other language right now, and you guys,
Oh, I didn't mean
take
that.
a lunch
Well, we
or-
can do that if you want, but I meant in terms of just the committee in terms of lunch. Do you guys need to take lunch now? Or we just want to keep going for a while?
Well, how many more of these?
There's quite
do
a
we need-
few of them.
okay.
I would imagine if it will take I would say at least another hour, maybe.
Committee's call. I'm
based
comfortable
on
with
this
whatever
one.
you all want to do.
Sorry, apparently we have a
Okay.
lunch caucus.
Okay, perfect. So let's
for the
take
finance
lunch, come back at 1 o'clock.
Go on.
now?
Then, Representative Luna, when can we work with the DOE?
So, Caitlin, I know your time is very valuable. In terms of the discussion that we had, would you have enough that you could offer some a draft starting point, and then Dan and I could talk about it with you and.
So,
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, just look, if you just look at that tape sequence, right? It was
Yeah.
5
Well,
minutes.
listen, do you have language you could put in there? That would just do the descriptive part? That's the part we
Well,
have his
I think the
language.
proponent of the language was my colleague, and I
No, no,
was.
hang on. We know his language.
I-
Could you do the descriptive part?
It sounded like we were in agreement
I
with
would
the.
I would be open to my colleague providing a suggestion for the descriptive language, and I would review it and run it by, I would be happy to, but I'm not gonna volunteer to write that language myself because it does belong more to my colleague.
Well,
So,
but his approach is not to be descriptive, but to say A or B.
and yet he was very descriptive
no,
when
I-
specifying how he chose, and I know that he
You
would
could do that?
be happy
I could
to.
do, we
Yeah.
could
Do
do
that.
something descriptive.
Get it to
but
Mickey.
it needs to be very clear that it's high value and applies to the.
So
broad
let's
group
look at the
of-
language.
You're
yeah.
writing it, do it your way, get it to Mickey.
Okay.
And I get it to Mickey and me, and I will review it and give Mickey the green flag. And obviously, let's include
So
Caitlin.
just one point. So
Ms.
the
Davies
existing
here.
law it says may, which is obviously not a requirement, but it says the department may use PSAT or SAT. So if that's really your intention, that's what the existing law says. So if you're looking to change it to shall, then it's just a shall to may. Otherwise, you don't need the language at all. So
But he wants to
That's-
include ACT, other thing.
it says AT.
Well,
It says
does
ATT right
say
now.
that in
Oh,
there.
does
It says
okay.
ACT. It says it says SAT or S. Right.
Enough.
And fair enough. If there's no budget for the 10th grade, then maybe leaving
That
We
out.
could just leave it the way it is.
leave it the way it is
Okay.
and
I'm
take it
fine
up
with that,
another
too.
time. I'm okay.
But I want to move on.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not gonna volunteer for more work. No. I'm gonna be fine if we don't change the language right now in the way you describe. I would still like Mickey to provide the amendments for the discussion, just in case we may need to adopt one of them. But
but he can't without the language.
So, if I may, I can draft these. You can still edit them later. If there's one part of it, I can at least get those started, if that's helpful.
I would, that's great. I said I would like, if Representative Luna could write some language up, forget about this, just on your own, and share that with Mickey, we could at least have that if that was okay with you. Yeah, thank you. All right, so you guys get going, and we'll take a break for lunch until 1 o'clock. Would that work for you guys? Okay, thank you. So what do I do, recess, Mickey? Yes. Okay, so I'm taking a recess until 1 o'clock. 3. We'll resume our our Division 2 Finance Work Session, and I'll turn it back to either Mr. Landrigan or Ms. Davis, depending on who's, there he is right there, look at that.
Yeah, so the next amendment, I think you voted on this already today in House Bill 115 and in House Bill 2 relative to EFA eligibility definition. So as part of the department's additional prioritized needs, they submitted in their agency budget request. You see the language there. And I'll leave it at
What
that.
page?
Page 12.
Technical corrections improvements to special education aid?
No.
Page 12.
That's page 13, sorry.
Yeah, PDF.
Universal EFAs,
PDF
department
page 13.
prioritized?
Yeah, you already did that, so probably
Yep.
don't need to do anything additional with the department's request on that. Sorry, Mickey, I'm talking for you. You talk.
Are you all set with that one to move past the EFA discussion based on actions the division took this morning? Do you have anything else to talk about this, or?
What is there to talk about?
So like I said, that's what I'm saying. I don't think there is anything to talk about unless there's anything you want to talk about.
Okay,
I don't know.
so we don't need an amendment or anything, just let it
Nope.
go. Perfect.
I'm just touching all the
I got
document here.
it, that's good, keep going.
So the next page 13, relates to the special education aid, catastrophic aid, as more commonly known as. I would recommend holding off on this now because this committee hasn't decided on what you're doing yet with catastrophic aid. We have a bill that's been retained. So when
I'd like to talk about this. one.
yes,
Go for it.
Yeah.
but yes, there's some technical things here that the department she can walk us through.
So regardless of what you do for the appropriation for catastrophic state special education aid, the department had proposed some technical corrections that have no cost impact relative to the current law. The first one is, so I can just kind of talk you through everything that's on PDF page 14, packet page 13. The first thing is it's the State Board of Education doesn't make the payments or doesn't have any interaction with that. And those of you that have been on other committees or been doing this for a while, you've heard me talk about needing to recodify education law in general. And the department had tried to do a lot of that relative to this kind of proposal, or these proposals in general. But very frequently in the law, it says the State Board of Education will do something. The State Board of Education doesn't have any staff. It's the department that ends up doing it ultimately. And so we're really trying to improve legislation going forward. Since we already wanted to change another piece of that, we thought that was an opportunity to change this part in law as well. But the major change that we have here is that right now, the department does an estimated cost per pupil, which that is what the school districts then use to calculate and request state catastrophic aid. So we use the estimated cost per pupil and then figure out what the cost of 3.5 times that is, and that's when a student becomes eligible. Rather than using the estimated cost per pupil, the department would like to use the actual cost per pupil. The only difference is really a timing thing. So we would be using, that information would be available in December of that year. And then we're not doing this estimated cost per pupil calculation. The estimated cost per pupil calculation right now is not something that's used anywhere else in law or anywhere else by the department. It's kind of an arbitrary calculation. And so we felt like this was much more tied to like reality of everything. So that's really what we want to do for that. The other.
Representative Murray?
Thank you. So you said you want to use the actual cost, which,
Yes,
yeah, makes sense.
correct.
Why do you use the words most current state average expenditure as opposed to actual?
So just based on the timing of, whatever is the one that's available. So the thing that's a little confusing is so we wouldn't have the actual cost per pupil of school year 23-24 until after the end of 23-24. So we would want the schools to use the most current one available. So we would just say, if they were requesting it for this year, they would use the most current, which is actually technically last year's cost per pupil. And that's the one that they would be basing the calculation on.
So that's the most appropriate metric that you would have to try to
Correct.
grasp what you're doing there. Okay.
Correct.
Representative Luna?
Thanks very much. Can you tell us how you're currently doing the estimated costs and how you would be doing the most current?
So the most current, the estimated cost per pupil is the amount that's the one we take all of the Department of Education DOE 25s, or sorry, all the school district submissions to the department DOE 25s. We total all of those up. We take all of the expenditures, less transportation, tuition, and food and nutrition revenue. I think, don't quote me on that part. It is in law. I can get you the law that defines that calculation. And that's the number that we publish. And it's used for a variety of different reporting mechanisms that we do across the state. So it's basically the operating cost per pupil per student. And that's what's on the department's website. So that's how we do that. We do the estimated cost per pupil by looking at some information relative to school district budgets that's submitted to DRA and the estimated cost per pupil over the last 3 years. And then we come up with what we think the average cost per pupil for the next school year is going to be. So there's been times that we've gotten within $100 or $200, and I think that the people that do that estimate are very proud of the estimate, but it's still very much an estimate, and we think that the calculation should be an actual number, not an estimate.
Okay, quick follow-up on that. Does that also include federal dollars in the calculation?
Yes.
Under the estimate? Or?
Yes, for the entire cost per pupil, it's a combination of state, local, and federal expenditures.
Okay, and then a final quick question, if I can, Mr. Chair. So when moving from the estimated to the most current, do you have a sense as to if that number is going to be moving up or down based on this?
So for the first year, it really based on how the department does its estimates, but it's usually within a few $100s each year, so it could vary. But.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Popovich?
Thank you. I believe that I recall from our education funding that you did bring this topic up when we were talking about special education. And my understanding of it at the time, and please correct me if I misunderstand it, is that basically right now you're using one methodology for parts of it, one for this, and it would make sense to just be consistent and use the same methodology, which is to look at the most current actual costs whenever possible, just to simplify and make it more consistent and predictable for the school districts. They wouldn't have to worry about 3 different estimates. They would just have this one estimate we use across the board. Is that the discussion that I remember?
That's exactly correct, yes.
Okay. Then I will just say that I do not believe, and I'm sure I will be corrected if I don't recall it right, I don't think there was any concern that I've heard in the education funding about that change. But again, I may not remember everything, but I think that was something that while, that committee did not have to decide on, there wasn't really any meaningful concern, I think.
We had felt that, if there were other uses of this estimated cost per pupil we were producing it, or for other state or federal laws, that made sense to continue to use it. And maybe there was when state special education aid was first, invented 30 years ago, but it's not something the department uses now, and it doesn't seem to make any sense relative to our current workload and whatnot.
Just in response to that, thank you. So I think there was some discussion in the Education Funding Committee about really sort of what the purpose of this special education aid is, and formerly catastrophic aid, and whether it's really to try to address districts' costs that are associated with students that have the highest degree of need, and whether the average cost should in fact factor in all of these costs that are over and above the costs of what, I don't like the term, what's called regular education, or is the intent here to look at the average per pupil cost as being the regular education costs, so that we're really focusing on the differences that are ascribed to special education, and in this case the most highest need special education cost.
I do think that's been part of the question. I think what you're talking about would be a much larger change than what the department is proposing. That would be more of a policy change rather than just we consider this really just a technical cleanup.
Representative Hagan Phillips.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at the like the sheet you provided us on March 10th. That's like the side-by-side graphic, I don't know, spreadsheet. And when I look at the description of this item, there is a column that says agency yes, governor no, requesting division 2 yes. Could you describe, does this mean that you asked the governor and they said no, or does this mean you didn't ask the governor?
So it was in the original agency's proposal. The governor's proposal did not include many of the department's changes, which those are actually all of the changes that we're talking about today. I don't know what reason the governor's office did or did not include them. I think just they were, some of them were very technical and they might not have had, the time to get to some of them or, have these kind of larger conversations. So that's where it is. This was, it's funny, this was more of an internal document. It wasn't necessarily intended to be handed out, but it was handed out, so you guys have it. So the department originally in our agency requests, which was back in the beginning of last summer, the summer of 24, had written this language. The governor did not choose to include it, and the department is still saying we do feel like this is important language. Another example on that spreadsheet is actually the lease aid, for example. So the department did request something, the governor didn't choose to include it, and we've actually since revisited what we requested and said we actually may want to talk about this in a different time, and so we said let's remove this from our Division 2 request. So that's really what we're going with that.
Did you want to speak to the 3 lines that are stricken out in the middle?
So the next one, it says, if there are unexpended funds appropriated under this paragraph, the paragraphs then go to court-ordered placement and episode of treatment. So with this one, we didn't necessarily feel like this was really clear. Actually, I will say I think the department historically had not operated in this way, and Mickey brought it to our attention, I don't know, 4 or 5 budget cycles ago, and then that's when we started implementing this process. One, because the department hasn't had any surplus appropriation, but we think that it's much, so right now the way it works is if you have state special education aid, we make the payment and say the total payment was $30 million across the state and you had appropriated $33 million. Then the department would make any appropriated payments that were required to under court ordered placement. You say you appropriated $4.5 million, and then the department but say the request under that was $5 million. The department would use this appropriation to make that payment, and if we needed anything on top of that, we could draw a warrant. So what we really felt like it was saying, if there's any additional state special education aid, just lapse that and then allow the department. Well, not allow, the department already has the authority to just go ahead and draw a warrant on this other program. So you're not doing this kind of, cross line accounting. It's just, here's state special education aid, here's the cost, anything not will lapse, and then the department will make this payment, here's the cost of this, draw the warrant that you already have the authority to draw the warrant on.
So why don't you draw up that amendment?
That again?
So why don't you draw up that amendment?
Okay, I'll keep that in mind because like I said, depending on what you do with House Bill 773 relative to CAT A, we're going to be in this RSA, so
Okay.
I'll just keep that. And I'm assuming no one would have a problem with the change from the State Board of Education through the commissioner to just the Department of Education. And
I mean,
then
if you want to make the state board do it, and us have nothing to do with it.
and then the question of, replacing estimated with most current state average. So those, you understand the technical nature of these, and we'll incorporate those into whatever.
And the third one too, the 3 lines.
Well, yes, and I'm going back to the other 2. So all of this we would incorporate into whatever you do with sped aid.
Perfect.
Yep.
And Mr. Chair, and that would be on top of the 773 as the base.
To be determined.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, but as far as an amendment is concerned.
To be determined. Okay. I mean, that bill was retained. So at this point, whatever, if anything, this division does with sped, we would incorporate this. So I'd say almost this is the base. And then
They have to work together, I think is what he's
And
saying.
then if you want to layer House Bill, so this division has not decided whether or not to include 773 into House Bill 2.
Okay.
That's the
Gotcha.
Next up, so it's just a removal of the word factor. Factor was left over from a previous grant. There was a factor when we had fiscal disparity aid that was used in the calculation. The word factor is not used or defined under the current formula, and so we thought it would be good to remove that word factor because we don't have a factor anymore.
So is there any problem with having Mickey drop that amendment?
I'll keep this one in mind as well, depending on what this committee does with determination of education grants, adequacy. You have House Bill 563 retained, so I'll clean this up as part of that amendment or on its own if you don't do another amendment.
So the next one, requiring the state's assessment portal to be used for the naturalization examination. So there is a current law requiring all public schools, non-public schools, charter schools in the state of New Hampshire to administer the naturalization examination and report the results of that to the department. The department has worked with an assessment vendor to develop an assessment for public schools to use. So the department wanted to be clear that the implementation of the assessment should go through the state portal. That's the state's expectation of how we will collect the information to comply with the state law. There were a few technical changes that were in there too. We removed June 30th because of that date doesn't necessarily make any sense. You know, it says a grade of 70. It's an assessment. We use the term score. And then it talks about the department publishing a report each year relative to the results of the civics assessment. So that is the proposal that schools shall use the department's portal. The requirement for them to participate in the assessment is in current law already.
Representative Murray?
Yeah, thank you. I'm just curious, what do schools, but the public schools use now? It sounds like there's a portal, it's online.
So
and then
we've
they
spent the
have
last
access
year
to that already.
developing a portal, but there's no requirement for the schools to use the portal currently. So that means that they could use something locally. There would likely be a cost associated with that. But even if they were to use a different assessment or a different assessment tool locally, they are required to use the state's portal, which is the assessment to report the scores.
What are the options other than the portal outside the schools?
state
Doesn't
hasn't-
everything go through this? No?
So the portal is in fact the state's assessment with this. So we don't have a separate data collection. What we could do is we could develop a separate data collection through a separate collection tool and make that available too, but there's additional costs associated with that, and we never like to have two separate mechanisms of collecting the same.
Right, it just seems to me the whole thing should be through this portal.
That is what the state is
Right, right.
requesting.
And my daughter-in-law.
Great.
So where is the new language that says the state is required? It sounds like if the synopsis was always there, it was already there.
So the law requiring it is RSA 189.11. So it requires this to be eligible for graduation certificate, a student
So
in a
it's
public
already
school.
required. is my
Yes,
point.
it's already
You're
required.
not changing that.
Yes, that was changed, I believe,
Okay. I thought you
2
were-
years ago.
I
No,
misheard-
the department is not changing that.
I misheard. I thought you said you were requiring them to.
No, we're requiring them to use the state's portal to give that information to us. So the department will essentially be offering the naturalization examination as a statewide assessment now, rather than just requiring a data collection on that.
Okay. Is everybody okay with having that, Donna? Anybody not okay with that? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, we'll pause.
My understanding is it's really like the delivery mechanism of how schools tell the state they've done the assessment.
Yes.
You know, okay.
So you're good.
Yeah.
All right, carry on.
Right, next in the packet. So the next thing in the packet is allowing the Department of Education to use the most recent audit done by the LBA to count as an audit that is required. So right now, special education is required to have an audit every 10 years. And this was something that the commissioner had proposed to kind of just create efficiency, saying that the LBA did most recently complete an audit. And so we wouldn't need to do a separate audit outside of the LBA's audit this year.
Mr. Chair, I had just a follow-up question.
Go ahead.
I think the first time we talked about this, Caitlin, if I'm correct, there was some concern about an appeals process if a school didn't like the way it turned out, kind of thing. Is that still the case? Or am I
Schools aren't being
mixing?
audited.
Am I mixing?
I think that's something
Oh, that must be a
different.
different item.
Yeah, I think,
sorry.
I think that's a bill.
You're
that
right.
talking
That's a
about.
different thing. Thank you.
So go ahead, Representative Murray.
Thank you. Maybe it's here, when would in the natural flow of things, the next audit for special ed be? Would it be, is it 2025 if I'm looking at your evaluated in
I
2015?
believe so.
Well,
And
Looks
the
like there was a 2015 evaluation, so there may be a 20.
And I believe there's one in process right now, isn't there?
The LBA audit is in process right now.
I mean, a second one. There was already one just completed maybe a year ago or 8 months ago or something.
So I think the LBA audit that was completed was relative to the dispute resolution process. However, they are doing a current audit right now of the department's special education process, and that's the one that's in process currently.
So I thought, now I'm confused. So for the 2025 evaluation, you want to use what audit?
The LBA's audit.
The LBA's audit, okay.
Mickey's doing it right now.
I'm working on that audit as we speak. No, I'm not. Our audit division completed the audit, performance audit and the dispute resolution. As Caitlin said, that report came out, I think end of last year or something like that. And we are currently doing an audit of their process of special ed as well. So it was a big audit that ended up getting split into two. So we have completed an audit. That's the one referenced in this amendment, but we are also still in there doing more special ed auditing.
If there are no issues with this, I'll have Mickey draft an amendment. Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
we just had a second to take a look at the request about the word factor being removed, and I think we have some additional comments to share with you.
Fair enough. Go ahead.
So, Mr. Chair, I think the factor is actually calculated between the what do you call it, the floor and the ceiling. And if you apply the same factor between an ever expanding floor or an ever changing floor and ceiling, you're not necessarily going to get the result that's intended. Yep. Yep.
So
So you're okay with deleting it?
No.
So what's happening here, I didn't want to get overly technical with this conversation because I was going to clean this up in a later amendment. So what this language is relative to the 2% annual increase. So where we're increasing the grant floor, the grant ceiling, the max grant, the factor is a product of those, but that is not going to grow by 2%. So that would not want to be included in this annual adjustment. So this makes no change to what the determination of the grant is. The factor is going to remain constant. This is purely a technical change that
As amended, it will be correct.
as amended, it would be correct.
I'm glad we went back and looked at that.
We were going to include this anyways. We were going to have this. Yeah.
Okay, let's just move forward.
Yeah. This.
I want to let poor Caitlin get out of here.
A chance to review it anyway.
Sure.
So let's see.
What page are you on now?
7981. Chapter 7981. Page 18. I think that one is by my page.
What is? that, Mickey? What? Do you know what that on 18 is? The one on page 18, Mickey, do you know what that is? Or 17? Original finding unit.
17, I think. Wasn't that just the continuation of the one before? Maybe not.
Oh.
I wonder if a page got
Oh,
lost
yeah.
there.
Yeah, maybe that's.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yes, I think that was just it was cut. I think, okay, that makes sense. I think that's probably the continuation
Yeah,
of the.
I tried to page break
Yeah.
this document in between so you can jump right to document page 18, PDF page 19 is the next section.
So this next section is relative to a program at the Department of Education that was established last year. It was a computer science credential program. So what it did, it encouraged individuals working in industry to become computer science teachers. These are people that would already have an industry recognized credential, and then they would need to go through the credentialing process to become a credentialed teacher, whether it's through an alternative process or through the traditional educator instructional pathway. So this program, there are some individuals participating in this right now. I don't know the number. I don't think it's a particularly high number. But what it does is after an individual completes the completes the certification program, so they now have a certification and is employed as a computer science teacher. After the first year of teaching, they would receive a stipend of $5,000, and the second and third year, they would receive a stipend of $2,500. So in addition to this, the university system had reached out to the Department of Education and looking to expand the use of those funds. And so this would allow a partnership between the university system and the Virtual Learning Academy to allow high school students to take classes at UNH as well. We do have Lauren here from UNH who has some more information on the program if you have any interest in hearing about that. But it was really just these funds were available and they were not necessarily being fully leveraged. And so UNH was looking for an idea of how to expand this program.
Welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Lauren Banker with the University System of New Hampshire.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I was just going to share, and I mean, in addition to what Caitlin said, I think covers most of what I would have noted. The only other thing is maybe some of the goals of the program that I can highlight that we have here written down. Increase access to high quality college experience for these academically motivated high school students, accelerate student progress towards higher ed degree completion by allowing this opportunity for them to earn UNH college credit. This would be through UNH's College of Professional Studies, or CPS, while they also are meeting their high school grad requirements, and then support college readiness and success for students across the state by providing them access to this early college experience. So I think, you know, similar to what VLAX is doing with CCSNH, we've also been in conversation with CCSNH to make sure that these do not overlap in any way, that these are other courses, so they can provide other opportunities for students.
Anybody have a concern about drafting that one?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Representative Murray.
Thank you, sorry. So I'm hearing you talking about, you know, providing opportunities for students in order to get this credential. There's also the opportunity, people with extensive background working in computer science not hold recognized credential to teach science or related courses. So this is ostensibly a retired person, a retired software engineer would do what in order to be credentialed in order to perhaps teach
So they would need to go through the credentialing process. So whether it's through an alternative pathway or through a teacher prep program, they would need to do the requirements to become credentialed as a teacher. And then after they become credentialed as a teacher, they would then go teach for a year and then receive the $5,000 or the $2,500 after the various different years of them.
So they
teaching.
would still pretty much go through the same process as a college student going through this process. to
That's
get the
correct.
credential.
Yes, correct.
And then just, as an aside, there's so many talented people who have already proved their creds for decades that I wish we had an avenue to allow some of these people to participate in high school programs to take advantage of their talents. And to me, this is a bit of an impediment for that, but I totally understand it. I'm fully supportive of this. But I can have a whole slew of people retired who would love to be helping out in the schools and can't.
Representative Roy.
I agree with you on that. I think that's an excellent point to raise. Oops, could I have your last name, hon?
Banker.
Oh, okay. Just want to make sure. All right, thank you.
So you'll draft an amendment for that, Mickey? Thank you.
I should mention that the $2.7 million associated with this already is technically encumbered in a contract that would be providing these stipends to these individuals. We have required that people enrolled in the program notify the department by April 15th so we can get a better idea of how much money would be available. Because this would be adding another allowable use of these funds in addition to the existing program. All right. The next thing in your packet, so PDF page 20 /19. So there's a little bit of confusion between Mickey and I on this one, just because technically the language that you already amended relative to the Virtual Learning Academy should be amended with this language too if you choose to accept this. It's just kind of a the technical issue of making sure that you amend all areas of the language in the appropriate order. But so right now the Department of Education makes real-time payments to charter schools. We make a payment on September 1st-ish based on the school's opening enrollment. We make one on December 1st based on the school's November 1st count, on March 1st based on the February 1st count, and then based on their end of the year count. So in addition to the charter schools needing to provide counts to the department on those days, the charter schools are also required to provide the Department of Education an end of the year count information, and then a BOI, an October 1st count. So all schools in the state of New Hampshire, non-public, chartered, public schools, count the number of kids on October 1st, and they report that information to the department. The department didn't feel like it was necessary for the charter schools to do a count on November 1st after they had done the October 1st, and so we are requesting that we can use the October 1st count to make the December 1st payment rather than doing a November 1st count.
Any questions? Mr. Leonard, any comment?
Yeah, I think like this just spurs the question, like, what's the impact of not having to count twice? Other than you might get a more accurate number the second time, I guess.
So the variance in enrollment from November 1st to October, from October is nominal. We looked at it real quick and there didn't seem to be very many changes, especially because we're making the payments in real time. But regardless of what the count is, the Department of Education trues up the payment at the end of the year anyways. So any difference between October 1st and November 1st would be accounted for in the final payment, whether it's more or less.
So I guess we're talking a savings of energies
Correct.
by the department by not doing this November
For
count.
department staff and charter school staff that wouldn't have to do this additional count.
Any problems with that? Okay. No.
So procedurally, how we would do this is I jumped the gun a little bit earlier and had you accept section 121 and 122 of House Bill 2. This language here would actually overrule section 121. So what I'll do in the tracking sheet for tomorrow, if everyone's in agreement with this, is I'll break those two sections out into two separate rows, and you've got 122 good to go. I'll leave 121 open for now and carry this amendment as what you'll consider in its place instead. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Because the underlying section that you approved, it's virtually the same, and I'll tell you the only differences in the document that the department provided where it says enrolled and present and approved enrollment report and the October 1 date. Those are the only differences from what you already were good with. So I think I would call this somewhat technical, but I'll have that updated in the tracking sheets for Friday.
Perfect. He's gonna make it so we don't have to. He's gonna make, we just approved.
If
half of
everyone's
it and
okay with that way of doing it, I think we can.
He's gonna add a new line.
All right, next up in your packet, which I believe is the last one before we talk about any HB2 or HB1 changes or anything else. So is relative to our public school infrastructure grants. So the Department of Education has public school infrastructure grants, more currently known as SAFE grants. And those grants are a lot right now have been used really on the hardening of schools. They've been used for access control, surveillance, and emergency alerting program grants to schools for $100,000 per school right now. And then there is a it's a public school infrastructure commission, which is made up of legislators, both Senate and House members, as well as the Commissioner of Education, the State Board of Education, and individuals from Homeland Security and Emergency Management who help schools quite a bit with school safety projects. So that Public School Infrastructure Commission is the group that ultimately approves the grants right now. Then the Department of Education is required to bring that to the fiscal committee for final authorization. The department would like to remove the requirement for those grants to go to fiscal committee. Those of you that are on fiscal committee know that going to fiscal committee is not, or a grant approval through fiscal committee is not a traditional process for other grants in the state. So the department felt it might be helpful for us to remove that, especially since there is a legislators that vote on those grants. It also would allow the department to make the grants available to schools much quicker. So right now, it typically is at least a 3-month lag by the time the infrastructure committee approves the grants to the time that we're able to get fiscal authorization. And so we really just wanted to make sure those grant funds could make it out the door in a much more timely fashion.
Representative Popovich?
Was one of these grants ever turned down or modified by the fiscal committee as far as you remember?
No.
Thank you.
Anybody have any issues? Okay. I'll make you draft that one.
And that's it for HB2 language. I didn't know if we wanted to talk about any of the department's other requests or, we had some.
Do you have line 11, Mickey, on page 2 of your?
Yep.
Oh, I'm looking at the 18th. I might have the wrong number. 19th. Yes. So yeah, just still page 2, line 11. Do you want to speak to that?
That's state assessment admin. So that position is a position that's currently funded at the Department of Education. It's split 50-50 between federal funds and state funds, and the department, I guess an error, did not fund the general fund portion of that position. And so we're really looking to have our request is for those general funds to be added back in relative to the funding for that position. So that position, as we talked about earlier today, we have a state requirement for assessment and a federal requirement for assessment. So we're able to kind of split the time of that person and bill them half to general funds and half to federal funds. It's not really appropriate that the position be paid 100% with federal funds, and that's why we do the 50-50, because the requirement is much of the same. And so just an error, we had removed those funds, and we would like to ask for those funds to be back and to fund that position.
Do you need to do an amendment for that, Mickey, or will we just vote on this at some point?
You could just vote on this, just this line, and we would make the change in House Bill 1.
Go ahead, Representative Hagen-Phillips.
My understanding from the presentation on March 5th is that this is approximately $84,000 increase over the governor's proposal.
171,000 with the biennium, I think.
Right.
Is that what you mean? Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, that's just for 26. So yeah, for the biennium, it's double that. So.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. My bad.
So just remember new money, and also in light of today's earlier decisions, that's even more new money. So then I guess my question is, the earlier discussions we had about the assessments and the naturalizations and the civics assessments that I think are on book. Is this all part of that?
This person oversees that work.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
So can I just ask, were you not wanting to approve this? Just based on your comments, I wasn't sure which way you were going.
I just think it's worth recognizing this is more new money.
It's definitely more money, yes. Representative Murray.
So you suggest that there was an error that this was not included?
Correct.
It used to be included, so
Correct.
the error was in the last biennium?
So the individual this year is split 50-50 state funds and federal funds. When we were going through the exercise of balancing our budget to make the mandatory requirements relative to the budget, the 50, because we did have to take budget cuts relative to our existing operating budget to meet the agency targets required by the governor's office. It was reduced, and we reduced it and did not include the amount we needed to split this position.
So it was an oversight on
Correct.
your
It was-
part,
yes,
basically, so.
correct.
So yeah, it's sort of new money, but I also see that it's continuing a position that exists, and I would not want to fault you for an oversight, so.
Representative Popovich?
Thank you. I'll just add that to me, it's not even new money. It's new money to the governor's budget, but it's money that was inadvertently removed from the governor's budget, as far as I understand. So to me, this is just fixing a minor error, well, minor, an error in budgeting that would have serious consequences if we don't fix, because, you know, they cannot fire half a person, and we definitely cannot run a position that provides state support with only federal money, because that would have serious consequences to our federal compliance. So this does not seem to me like a very discretionary type of decision. Frankly, I think we just gotta bite the bullet.
So if nobody has any problems with that, I'll go ahead and accept the motion, but if somebody has a problem, then I won't. Okay, someone want to make a motion?
Fine. I'd like to, I got it, line 11. I'd like to make a motion to make the adjustment in HB1 requested in line 11 of page 2 of our current tracking sheet, adding a total of $171,433 for a state assessment administrator position AU 7064.
You all set? Is it a roll call? Oh, did I get a second? Representative Bean? Can we do a show? I meant show of hands. That was my intention. All in favor, please raise your hands. Any opposed? No. Motion passes.
This is not one motion that generates a report, so.
What, are those areas that,
So I didn't know if you wanted to talk about charter school enrollments or any of those things, or if there's
you-
anything else.
can you direct us to where we are?
So lines 14 through 17 on that same page, you could just revisit those with the department. Just a refresher, the department came in with estimates for charter schools. EFAs you perhaps could hold right now because we still need to figure out how, based on your actions with House Bill 115. But specifically, these were items that, and charter schools being the bigger one, the budget that came out of the governor's office was much different than what the department's presenting for its estimates, and just how you would want to handle that.
Okay. I think I'd like maybe consider this on Friday. Give me a chance to contemplate it more awake and state, but I'm happy to hear any comments from Representative Luna.
Right. Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. So on line 14, the charter school aid, is that the lease aid
Line 14 on which document?
of today's tracking? Yeah.
This
Lost.
is the charter school funding line, like
The charter school funding, not the,
not lease aid.
not the lease aid.
Correct.
And that,
County Unit 345 is what we're
Correct.
planning.
Correct.
okay. And, and
Lease
so,
aid was level funded this year at $850,000, though, to answer that question.
okay.
And just so everyone remembers, what these figures are is the difference between what the governor's budget is before you and what the department's estimates were. So if you were to fully fund the department's estimates, these would be the adds.
So I do want to just point out with the department's estimates too, when we presented our estimates last week, we kind of gave you for the charter schools 2 buckets. So we gave you, actually technically 3 buckets. All of the charter schools that are existing, that are approved, we give you that are operating right now, that have kids in them today. Those schools are all on there. We gave you the estimate for that. We then gave you an estimate for new schools. So we have a group of schools that have been approved by the State Board of Education that are not open today, that we do anticipate opening in the biennium. And then we have another group of schools that are currently in the application process with the Department of Education. We anticipate them being approved by the by the State Board of Education, and then opening during the next biennium. So those are kind of the different buckets.
The next year of the biennium.
The next year of the biennium, yes.
Right.
Right, it's too late for a school to open for 26 that has not been approved by the State Board of Education.
So, Mr. Chair, just to put this in context then, so, sort of back and finger in the air, the charter school grant is about $9,500, something like that, per ADM.
I think 92.
But I mean, it's in that, just to make the
Yes.
math easy.
Yes.
So, so what the department is projecting then is for next year, FY '26, there to be about 1,000 more charter school students, and then
So-
in '27, almost a couple thousand.
Yes, so for charter school kids this year, we predicted, or so from 25, we are estimating there will be 7,300 kids, 7,500 kids for 26, and 7,700 kids for 27. Those are for the existing schools.
Could you hit those numbers
Yeah,
again?
Can I send you the spreadsheet? Yeah. Is there, we'll give it
And
to you.
and if FY '25 is on there too?
Yeah, so we have it, I think,
Okay.
I know you weren't here at one of the
Yeah,
department
I-
of the presentation, but
It's like 6,300.
Right.
6,300.
See the 16?
It's just from a different presentation of like how many kids.
I'm getting 5,400 for '25.
24, 25.
you've got to look at the bottom number. It's the 7,300. The 5,400 is the traditional brick and mortar schools plus
Right.
plus the VLAX kids,
Plus the VLAX.
yeah,
So you
which
get
we've
7
broken out to full-time intending VLAX, and then also the FTEs, so which are the kids from across the state that are accessing coursework
Mm-hmm.
at VLAX.
Okay, and is VLAX included in the line 14 grant?
Yes, the VLAX amount is included in that.
Okay.
So the line 14 amount includes all of the VLAX, all of the existing schools, and all of the new schools at the 75% of their enrollment requests provided from the charter school to the department. The new schools are very much an estimate, and the department wants to make sure that the committee is aware of that. There are times that schools open substantially lower than their estimate, and then there are times that schools open substantially higher than their estimate provided to the department, and they've needed to go back to the State Board of Education to request additional authorization for their charter to increase their enrollment cap.
So if we're looking at an increase over current spend in '26 of 9.4, is that what
Correct,
that is?
correct.
And then an increase in FY '27 over current spend, not FY '26, right?
Over the governor's estimate,
Over the governor's estimate
yes.
of 16 million, then how does that tie in with your estimates of essentially increasing ADM by about 200-ish students year over year from 25, 26, and 27? 7,400, well, 7,347, 7,564, and then 7,753. Are we increasing beyond the The 92, the charter school.
The per student amount? No, we haven't suggested changing the funding
So
formula at all.
what contributes to
So,
these numbers? that
so the
look
charter
like they-
schools, for 26 will get 93.63 for every student plus differentiated aid. So they're receiving a little bit more per student. So say it's $10,000 or $11,000 per student. But the governor's budget estimate was based on an estimate the department prepared in the summer of last year. And then these are based on the actual numbers this fall. I don't have the number that we used when we prepared the governor's budget, but, enrollments had increased more than we had originally anticipated. So.
Okay. Representative Popovich?
So, when looking at this, I understand that obviously estimates change over time and budgeting is never a exact science as much as we'd like to make it. But my question is, when we are looking at such increases because our estimated number of students increase that will go to charter schools, wouldn't those students come from somewhere else? Mostly public schools, I would best guess, based on just the current ratio of students.
So, yes, as charter schools have continued to grow over the last however many years we've had charter schools, public school enrollments have declined. And that could be for a variety of reasons. It's because of kids moving from public school to charter schools or EFAs, also just because of a population decline in New Hampshire. When the Department of Education did its estimates for traditional public school adequacy, we did factor in an enrollment decline based on the last several years' average enrollment decline. So we are already factoring in an enrollment decline.
My concern and the reason why I'm asking these questions is that while I don't have a conclusion at this time, it kind of feels to me like we may be estimating a large growth in charter schools, but we haven't necessarily captured the other side of the equation in our adequacy for public schools. And I'm just trying to balance the two, because if we estimate that one kid goes from A to B, then we should also move the money. Right now, I would guess that we are adding a lot of money for kids that we are estimating in charter schools, but we may not have considered the drop in the same estimate, in the public schools. And mind you, at the end of the day, it will all be actuals, right? I mean, all this will be paid on the actuals. If a kid goes to a school, we'll pay them in the budget regardless. But when doing the estimates in the budget, I want to make sure that if I'm adding money to one pocket that can only come from one other pocket, or most of it, then we have to reduce the estimate in the other pocket. Do you see what I'm saying? I don't know if
I do, and the department does estimate enrollment decline in traditional adequacy. We don't necessarily say it's because of kids moving to charter schools, but we are estimating. So, I mean, if the committee would like, the department or Nikki and I can work together to estimate an additional enrollment decline in district public
I
school.
just would like it to be
account for these
accurate.
things.
I'm not looking for an additional. I'm looking for making sure that these two analyses have been reviewed at the same time. My concern is that there is a chance we've done the public school assessment at a time, at a different point in time where the estimates may not have been fully updated. And now this is more recent and catches more students moving. But I just want to make sure that those analyses are looked at together with the same assumptions, at the same point in time based on our estimates of students. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't want to.
I do. And so what I would say is the department's estimate in enrollment decline over the last 10 years or so has already accommodated for kids moving to various different educational pathways. So in the last couple of years, when the department has an enrollment decline of say 1.8%, that is capturing kids moving into charter schools. It's capturing all of those things. So we believe that enrollment decline that we're using is consistent and accurate. We could certainly speed it up if we think that there may be more.
I would appreciate if you just re-examine them together to make sure that you are making the same assumptions for both of them. I'm not saying you didn't do that already, but I would appreciate a quick double check on that, because those are large numbers, and I want to make sure I don't double count, for the lack of a better word, the same child on one hand caught in an analysis that it moved and in another caught that it stayed in the school, and I'm trying to budget 2 times the adequacy for the same hypothetical child, you know.
Right. And so I would argue that our enrollment decline already does factor that in.
If you could just double check.
I will. But the other thing too, to remind the committee, is if a student is, moves to a charter school in fiscal year 26, the public school and the charter school are going to get paid, because the public school is paid 1 year in arrears, where the charter school is paid 1 year current. So you're not going to see any decline associated with it that year. It wouldn't be until 27.
Completely understand that we get a bump in the year of the move because of the way we choose to finance to make sure that nobody gets surprised.
Yeah. Representative Ludo?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to go back to the numbers, though, the 9.4 and the 16.8 in FY '26 and FY '27. How do you arrive at those numbers?
So
Yeah,
let's see. So the governor's budget for charter schools, way too many papers in front of me right now. I think it's that. So for charter schools, it was, the governor's budget included 66.8 million and 68.1 million for 26 and 27. So then the department's estimate, for all schools, new and existing schools, is the 76 million for 26. So the difference between the 66 and the 76 is that 9 million number. And then the governor's budget for 27 was 68 million. The department's estimate is 84 million. So that's what the difference is there.
thank you.
Based on new March numbers, right? Like your
Yes, and
most
that's
recent payment.
yeah. So that's exactly, the governor's budget was before the school year even started. Those were the numbers that we prepared. They were the agency budget, and then we discounted again for March 1st to make that payment, and we had substantially higher numbers. Additionally, there's a fair number of schools that have been approved since the last estimate, either by the state board, so have been approved, and then there's another large group of schools that have submitted applications to the Department of Education.
But even with that, though, what you're showing here is basically a year-over-year increase of around 200, 250 students in charter schools.
Correct.
So not a 1,000 student increase or anything like that.
Correct.
So okay.
So.
Any other discussion on that one? Okay. On line 16, so 2 down from that, I guess my question there is, the phase-out grants, are those more or less the amounts, anyway, locked in based on the current and the previous year or previous year's populations?
So the phase out grant, we do have 1 more year of estimates or 1 more year of the calculation that will need to be made. So the kids that take an EFA this year and that move over, those ones will be entitled to a phase out grant. We did an estimate for those kids, but then after that it will be locked in, and there will, assuming the committee doesn't expand the phase out grant, will then end after that. So will be paid through fiscal year 28, but there will be no additional cohorts added to the phase-out grant calculations.
So your 27 estimate includes that?
It still includes an estimate, but
You've already done that?
yes, correct.
Okay. Does anybody have any concerns with that particular line? On our side? No? Do you want us to move ahead on that, or do you want us to get them all together one time?
I think it may be easier to do all of the education
Okay.
trust fund in one
That's fine.
package.
That's fine. And I'll just point out or I might make you point out, but line 17 is essentially locked in as well. That's my understanding. That's Bedford, starting kindergarten.
Yes, that we give you yes.
So that's
For 27, it's not locked in. 27 is still an estimate. We don't.
let's cut it then.
I was
kidding.
No, well, no. So the schools haven't voted yet. We have warrant authority, and they did not vote yes for this.
Go ahead, Mr.
Sorry,
Landigan.
that is all relative to Bedford. It's carried on this line to say kindergarten. So in year 1, it would be kindergarten aid. In year 2,
Oh, it's
it would
the
just be their adequacy would be up because they'd have
Okay.
full day kindergarten. So
I really
this
was
is-
just joking.
yeah, no, this is all directly related to just Bedford. It doesn't assume more programs coming on board the second year.
Okay. All right. Yes, go ahead.
I thought you were doing an estimate for
Turn
the
your-
other 2 schools.
We never had full-time kindergarten in
Bedford.
Hampshire.
No. This is let's not go there. But this is Bedford adding into kindergarten. Let's just leave it at that. Okay. Are there, there you go. Are there further education lines?
I don't
Or
think
items?
so. Do you have anything else?
I don't.
Well, Ms. Davis, thank you so much for coming in today. I'm hoping we won't need you on Friday, so we'll try to stick to that.
I will be available. Dominic knows how to get a hold of me.
Well, thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate it.
We could always zoom up.
So, Mr. Lanigan, do we have anything else?
I don't have anything else for you to vote on or anything today. If there's anything anyone wants to talk about as far as a plan for Friday, I know we said this morning that a few of the bills that we had work sessions on, we're going to reconsider. And I think we're going to try to get those for Friday
So
afternoon.
we'll start
perhaps.
with those.
Yep, and I still will need that final or confirmed list from you. I know you said the 4 this morning, so I want to make sure that's all there is.
Okay, I'll try to.
And then we'll get that notice out hopefully today. And then I should be prepared with some bigger items for us. So probably some stuff relative to the motor vehicle fees and the highway fund and the vehicle inspection repeal and the costs associated with that.
Fishing game fund?
Hopefully also fish and game. Fingers crossed. I think I have everything I need for that. And then also maybe some bigger picture work with the education trust fund. There's been discussions of amendments for moving some of the programs back to the general fund. And then also this committee would just have to decide how much you want to fund each of those programs at. So I can come up with a document that we can work from for Friday.
Okay, and also, go ahead. I'm not, go ahead, Representative Murray.
Not always paying attention. Did you include the transportation, public transportation in that when you were listing Friday?
So the transit match, you mean?
Yeah. the
So
vanity
that's
plate.
carried on here. There's no amendment for that, so that can be taken up at any time. And then if anyone else has amendments, I know I've done a few and sent them to you. I would just like the thumbs up, green light, like, yep, I do want to offer this, and then I'll include it in the packet. It's just easier to have everything in one package versus a bunch of separate handouts throughout the day. So I'll try to get in touch with everyone who did ask for amendments between now and tomorrow.
And hopefully the E911, maybe we'll have something by Friday on that
E-
in terms
yeah.
of the allocation.
Yes, I owe a call back to Amy. She reached out to me this morning, so I'm going to get in touch with her this afternoon, and we'll go from there.
Okay. So that seems reasonable. I have not yet spoken with Mr. McIntyre. I'll try to get a hold of him. But have you spoken to him just regarding coming in on Monday or Tuesday?
Not yet, but I can. I
Okay.
can reach out to see if we can get some of his time.
Okay.
I think my understanding as of, I think Representative Sweeney was still making a change or two potentially today, tweaks, nothing material from what he provided yesterday. So I don't know if they've had the meeting with Charlie like you mentioned yet or not. I don't think so.
How about Representative McGuire? Do you know if his bill has been drafted?
I don't know.
Okay. All right. I can check on that. Anything else from this group? Getting a lot of blank stares. So I'm hoping that means you're all exhausted as I am. So barring anything else, I will close the Division 2 Finance meeting at 2:05, almost 6.
It's already off.
I'm joined now by Norm Eisen. Norm, thank you so much for taking the time.
Brian, thanks for having me back.
So you are once again